Hello, Robs. We're back with the next installment of Flying Saucers and the Father's Plan by Laura Mundo, reconciling Christianity with science and philosophy. Um, yeah. Let's do it, bruv. A Peculiar Priesthood, Chapter 7. In June 1958, we formally opened the Planetary Center in Detroit. We rented the house. I tried to sell my own home in order to keep up the expenses of the new headquarters, and finally had to practically give it away because I could no longer keep up the mortgage payments. Get a job. Eventually, however, I found that it had been returned to me, and I live in it now. We asked other groups to come in with us, offering to allow them to meet in different rooms so that they could conduct their own meetings to suit themselves. We asked, however, that they aid us in conducting an information bureau at the public level as a mutual project. This the groups refused to do, and it is sad to consider how much more area we might have covered, how much more understanding we could have conveyed had we received this cooperation and could have put all of our resources together. The other groups did, however, attend our formal opening, at which Orthon was also present, whispering, "Forgive them, they know not what they do." Very biblical. We were pleased that Professor Charles Maney, head of the physics department, Defiance College, Ohio, accepted our invitation and was the main speaker. Arthur Gibson, school principal from Grand Rapids, Michigan, attended. Many young people from college and all school levels also came. We believe that well-known figures and many other people attended and participated because we had taken the non-psychic stand. This has been expressed in our printed literature. Our newsletter had been distributed widely. As a result, newspapers, schools, church groups, and libraries referred their saucer inquiries to us. Requests for lecture dates came from all kinds of sources, even Air Force groups, professional societies, and science classes. We continued to attend the public meetings of other groups, even though their members had not reciprocated. How else could I have become a bridging transmitter, so to speak? For the Father, we were not always welcome, I am unhappy to say, and as a result, much of my work was not easy. When the Public Information Bureau returned to my little home in Dearborn, the visitors denoted their recognition of it when a saucer flew over it in broad daylight. It was in the late fall of 1955 while I was presenting a movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still, on a lecture tour. I recently watched that, and I believe that many of Laura's concepts of the Father came from that movie, but that's just my opinion. As Bob Chapek, the young man working with me and handling my promotional work, came to the house one afternoon, he entered hurriedly and excitedly informed me that a saucer was hovering over the house. He had seen it as he left his home in Birmingham, Michigan, a good 20 miles away, and it had moved along before him like the Star of Bethlehem. My younger son, John, and a neighbor woman who made her home with me to care for my boys when I was away, both watched it, along with me and Bob. It hung alongside a low cloud. It was so low we could see the portholes or circular openings through which monitoring discs are dispatched into the atmosphere. It was of gray metallic color, glistening as the sun shone on it. Suddenly a noise of jets screamed through the air. Evidently the saucer had been picked up on radar, and the planes dispatched to locate it. Slowly the saucer began to rise, colors appearing in its force field, running through a rainbow spectrum. Finally, it swerved at an angle and rapidly disappeared from view, the jets still streaking through the sky, unsuccessfully trying to find it. Although many adults accepted and supported the Planetary Center, it was the neighborhood children who understood most. Slowly, the center became a mecca for space-minded children, as they came to see what Midge, my television name, was doing. These visits increased as our own space program developed. They came in twos and threes and even more. but never more than what my little house could hold comfortably, so that I could speak to them intimately concerning the visitors, and never more than what I could sandwich into my writing schedule and summon strength for, a wonderful unseen hand apparently slowing down or speeding up the timing as I could take it. Each group brought back new friends until eventually, should a saucer have come down near the center, hundreds of children would have known what it was and would have assured their frightened parents that no danger existed. The same children had been informing their teachers of the visitors through writing compositions on the subject. This also took place on other educational levels, including college. The little child shall lead them into outer space and understanding. It is my belief that the Father will take the children of those parents with understanding to other planets by spaceship to safety soon under my jurisdiction. In this way, they will have the time and desire to aid him to bring about the universal way of life, as it is practiced on other planets. I don't know if she's going to mention the fact that the neighborhood mothers and fathers soon turned against her, and then people were stoning her house. But yeah, that's why you don't tell children that spaceships are going to take them away to outer space. The Planetary Center began publishing the present newsletter, the Interplanetary News, free, which any reader is welcome to request. At first, we sought to publish only material which we felt others might not find too fantastic, but then realized we were damming up our own avenues of expression, and that we would have to pull out all the stops and print the truth as we knew it, hoping that readers would forgive us when they could not understand all the material, or better, would seek further explanation. We held open house on Saturday night. Through the week, we had a heavy writing schedule and often a lecturing schedule, to which anybody was welcome to attend. We welcomed their questions, knowing the Father is constantly moving individuals from both of the other types of groups to us and out of our group to theirs, as they saw the wisdom of the middle way. Always in our minds was the realization that some of the new people who came, and that some of the old faces who left, were in reality visitors in disguise. True, we might have made more surface progress with small closed groups, but I knew that such closed groups throughout the past crystallized Earthman's thinking too quickly and halted his spiritual growth. Closed groups in the past came about partly through the fear of being misunderstood and persecuted, particularly during the Middle Ages, when the visitors tried to reintroduce the universal facts. Bruno, for example, entered the Roman Church as a priest, incognito, as the visitors entered all religions, also governments, though they also work perhaps harder on the grassroots level, as ordinary individuals taking very difficult jobs. They attempt to raise the self-appointed leaders in understanding rather than attacking from the outside, as the human mind is prone to do. Bruno's theories, actually facts which were impossible for the church to accept, of God being all of being. Later this was called pantheism, or an overall God, were denied by the Roman Church, which was then in supreme authority. Bruno's tongue was cut out, and he, along with his writings, were burned at the stake. In later years, the church itself was taught that God is everywhere, which is a similar idea but does not quite denote the entire situation. The church reserved what it felt to be its most profound and controversial understandings or teachings for its priesthood, giving them more and more, as these individuals went further into such studies called initiations, one of which explains Jesus as being consubstantial with God. Consubstantial. Or the God part of him being part of God. The Catholic congregations came later to understand, and many of its priests also, because the human mind has a tendency and ability to bring down to its frequency of interpretation any teaching, that Jesus was God come to be man, which the church has allowed because it could not explain technically that since the Father is the center of everybody's atoms, it does not have to go anywhere to activate itself. This would make Jesus seem less divine than the rest of us if this were known, and weaken the idea of Christianity, which has fallen into the same human mind trap that all religions have been ensnared by before it. It has organized itself to promote the memory of its inspirations. rather than spend full time living the teachings and setting up of a society so that it could be done as lay people living naturally, bearing children exposed to their more godlike understanding, as opposed to parents with lesser understanding. This is easier also for laymen to copy. Thus, there would be no religious leaders as such suspected of trying to merge church and state. Pope Pius X, 1903 to 14, was only partly right when he said that the affairs of church and state should be kept apart is certainly a false, even a dangerous notion. First of all, because based on the idea that the state ought to have nothing to do with religion, it is an insult to God, who is as much the founder and preserver of human society as he is of individual men. I mean, the whole church state concept that people think is that the state cannot ever speak of religion, which is a total falsehood. They just can't have an organized religion, an official religion, at least in our country, since the Church of England was basically running the government there. Anyway, the people on other planets have never allowed themselves to organize religions, which would separate themselves from each other and therefore God. They have concentrated on building a more godlike society to represent God, who is all people and all things. This is a vital difference, all caps, because it's an emergency statement, which must come to be understood by Earthmen's religious leaders. The Christian church, as has all previous religions, insisted one still needed Jesus to save us, unaware it was his duty as Lucifer to lead us into demotion. Jesus was Lucifer, according to Laura Mundo. Who else did she say said that? Oh, Madame Blavatsky. I mean, that's a... Anyway, Pope John the 13th, whose protonic soul energies were more active than those of his predecessors, was used innocently, skip the page, by the Father to call the Ecumenical Council. This council is seen as an instrument which will bring all Christian sects together in meeting, though its sponsors are unaware that the council is the beginning of their agreeing to dissolve themselves as organizations, as an example of all religions, as all of humanity becomes one under the Father in the universal way of life. If the Christians claim to have greater understanding of God, to whom else would he look? Could Paul have, by his phrase, a peculiar priesthood, meant a movement of lay people, men, women, children of all countries and of all religions and races being drawn out by the Father, as I myself am? Studying all religions of the past, but referring them to them as God in my mind. This is not eclecticism, as some who are still too intellectual will insist. The choosing of the best of all religions gets us closer to the universal facts left by the visitors before organized religions came about. These religions all began as schools based on these facts left by the visitors. I am simply reporting the more godlike way of life and the universal facts as the visitors have confirmed them. I could more readily conceive of them because I became a religious independent and a political neutral, and thus possibly one of the best men or women for the job. The priesthood of tomorrow, including those members of the clergy who became laymen from the universal level, will find out that the other individuals who have not confined their minds have grown beyond them in spiritual understanding. The priesthood of today will be reborn back into their same roles of the past, to dissolve what they themselves organized. Who else would be required by universal law to do it? This has been expressed by individual clergymen who have come to me for understanding. Clergymen were coming to her to understand life? All right, okay, buddy. Along with metaphysical leaders and leaders of secret societies. Let me read that again. This has been expressed by individual clergymen who have come to me for understanding, along with metaphysical leaders and leaders of secret societies. You heard that. Rosicrucianism, I think I said it right, a mystical religious study concerned with Christianity, came out of the Middle Ages and presented also the idea of the invisible bodies, as did Paul, upon whose interpretation in the main Christianity is based. Paul was born in Greek-occupied Tarsus. The Greeks' pro-Christian teachings, per the visitors, concerned this also, but their human minds forgot the negative, invisible body of which it was a part, speaking only of the Holy Ghost, as well as comforting the positive energies or positive polarity of being. They did not break the invisible bodies down to points of energy or atoms, or one atom with several degrees of energies, making up bodies of several frequencies, therefore not complete of themselves. Only degrees of the same thing, including the physical body. Consequently, the whole continuity of atomic being was lost. One of our chairmen insisted that saucers are also four-dimensional, and that only those high enough in consciousness could see them. To this idea, a visitor egging the individual on in my presence agreed, until she left. Then he shook his head sadly. This proved she did not know, or could not conceive that this would be seeing only one of the atomic bodies of a physical material saucer, and only because she was directing or allowing her consciousness to swing too far to the right or left. Am I reading this right, that since saucers are four-dimensional, that only people with the highest consciousness can see them? That's what she's saying. Kind of like dog sense. The visitors, as Adamski explained in Inside the Spaceships, activate or rev up the active outside parts of the saucer in the air to where the eye can follow, especially that of any pilot of an earthly plane, but as solid as would be the blades of a fan whirling, indistinguishable as individual blades to the eye. Consciousness. The balance of both the negative and positive minds is the only thing to be encouraged, because the Father mind is the highest balanced mind in the conscious mind, creating greater understanding. This can be accomplished only as the balanced lower conscious mind, or negative and positive or human and soul minds, voluntarily first balance themselves. Anything else encourages the vanity of the soul and the ego of the human mind. And this would again lead to demotion sooner than we would think. Rosicrucianism also employs astrology. Astrology is not generally untrue, even though it does represent a distortion of astronomical facts left by the visitors with the pre-Christian ancients. These ancient teachings concern the magnetic attraction between atoms of the same frequency via the remainder of the EB, I believe that's the Earth body, and the unknown, through their centers and the uplifting of greater high-balanced atoms, also going to make up planets and creating the same effects between planets. This also represents an effect in the body of man himself, since his atmospheric atoms also change. Correspondingly, as planets come into conjunction with each other, horoscopes have a tendency to prevent man from living each moment as his highest self, as the Father would have it. This limits man's growth, prevents the knowledge that man could and should have from being passed down to succeeding generations. Masonry, which also came out of the Middle Ages, was also a secret through non-religious body, concerned with revealing what is considered to be greater universal understanding, or knowledge, This was distorted already by the time they began, however, for at that time the true origin of their symbols was no longer known. The password of old, the phrase whispered low and mouth to the ear, was, "Have you traveled far?" Meaning that at one time Earthman knew some of his fellow men as people of our other planets living incognito on Earth. This password is now construed as to mean only how many degrees? How many degrees or initiations in masonry have you taken? The square as a Masonic symbol, which originally denoted the neutral sign of the atomic energy of all of being, appeared more like the letter T In this symbol, the negative and positive were balanced, indicating that higher balanced people were coming to help, including God, or Michael, as the Hebrews called him, from the sun. Also, it denoted the coming of less radiant or non-radiant people, though more evolved than Earthmen from the planets in our system. Many philosophers, such as the German Leibniz, did not form secret societies, picked up the visitors' teachings, but nevertheless misinterpreted them somewhat. Leibniz, taught of the monad, a luminous, living particle of which all things were made, though the particle did not represent living beings itself, as metaphysicians today misunderstand, such as Glenn's particles in outer space were promoted as individual beings, but not going to make up one living mind or being. The Father, and becoming the center of the atoms were when drawn together into forms through the center of the particle, or point of energy in single energy atoms by the remainder of the EB in the unknown. Word salad. The late Gloria Lee regretted in a TV interview that she couldn't promote understanding of the fact that this planet was a living entity or being. If she had started with the more profound, but at the time simpler fact that all of being is living energy gathered into different aggregates, the part the planet plays would fall into place for itself. Incidentally, I understand Mark Age, not sure what that is, Universirium, the Prescott, Arizona group, and others have been accused of being communist when presenting the idea of the universal way of life as best their mental contexts understand it. Another trap the visitors lay. Many people such as Gloria might prove to be visitors, appearing on television, for instance, pretending to make such mental contexts as a means of appearing before the public so that we can look back later and see how obvious they were, while some of us were still searching for visitors way out there instead. There'd be some red faces, won't there? Yeah, and one of them was going to be Lucifer, the archangel, buddy. Yeah. Tomorrow we shall go to the coming planetary shift. Goodbye.